The velvet curtain of the Montclair Theatre swayed gently, though no draught stirred the air. Its folds concealed a terrible secret. Beneath its heavy fabric, the lifeless body of Lord Henry Montclair lay slumped, a silken cord cruelly wound about his throat. The hush of the empty auditorium was broken only by the faint drip of water from a forgotten pipe, echoing like a ticking clock. Into this chilling silence stepped Hercule Poirot, his keen eyes scanning every corner with fastidious care. "Mon ami," he murmured to himself, "already I smell the faint perfume of deception." Chapter 1. The Theatre of Shadows. The Montclair Theatre had always been a temple of illusions, a place where velvet curtains, golden chandeliers, and whispered applause disguised the sweat, rivalry, and bitterness that lay behind the scenes. Tonight, however, illusion and reality had collided with a cruel hand. The velvet curtain itself, heavy, crimson, and smelling faintly of dust and perfume, concealed no stage trick. Behind it, sprawled upon the wooden boards, lay the body of Lord Henry Montclair, patron of the arts, his eyes wide and glassy, his throat encircled by a silken cord tied with grim precision. The theatre was deserted now, emptied of its audience not an hour past. The echoes of their laughter and applause had faded into the night air of London, leaving behind only the dripping of a faulty pipe somewhere in the rafters. A single gaslight burned low above the stage, casting strange shadows that danced like mocking silhouettes across the walls. It was here that Hercule Poirot entered, small in stature yet commanding in presence, his patent leather shoes clicking softly on the boards. He paused, adjusting his perfectly waxed mustache, his keen eyes surveying the scene with the measured patience of a man who trusted only in his little grey cells. Beside him lumbered Inspector James Harcourt of Scotland Yard, a man of broad shoulders and blunt manner, his notebook already in hand. "Here he lies, Monsieur Poirot," Harcourt muttered, gesturing to the body. "Strangled. No signs of struggle, no weapon left behind." The theatre staff swore no one entered after the performance, save those who belonged here. That narrows the field at least. Silk that seemed far too hastily chosen, her face pale and her lips painted a trembling red. She was the very image of a grieving widow, or the very portrait of guilt. Her eyes, though rimmed with tears, darted towards the curtain, as if fearful it might reveal more secrets than her own. Beside her stood Victor Hale, the theatre's director until only days ago, his gaunt face and stormy eyes betraying sleepless nights. He clenched his fists as though still fighting an invisible quarrel, with the man now dead at his feet. Rumors had spread quickly after Montclair dismissed him. Rumors of artistic disputes, of rage unbound. Clara Whitcomb, the ingenue, lingered nervously near the orchestra pit. She was no more than 20, her youth and beauty tinged with the raw desperation of one striving for fame. Her gaze flickered between Poirot and the body, her hands twisting a silk handkerchief almost to shreds. Montclair had been her patron, some said more than a patron. The kind of relationship that bred jealousy, scandal, and whispered threats. Dr. Adrian Keller, Montclair's personal physician, leaned against the proscenium arch, his expression unreadable. Tall, immaculately dressed, his spectacles glinting in the dim light. He exuded composure, yet his very calmness seemed an affectation, a mask. Physicians were men of knowledge, but knowledge could be dangerous when applied to death. And finally Geoffrey Trent, Montclair's rival in business, loomed in the back. His heavy frame and ruddy complexion bespoke years of good living turned sour. He eyed the scene with bitterness, muttering now and again about investments, betrayals, and fortunes ruined. Motive in his case was no secret. Poirot drew himself up, buttoning his coat with fastidious care. He approached the velvet curtain, pressing his fingers lightly against its folds. At once a faint scent rose, a woman's perfume, floral, subtle, yet unmistakable. His nostrils flared. Lady Evelyn wore that very fragrance, a costly Parisian creation known only among the most fashionable. "Eh bien," Poirot murmured, half to himself. Already the curse. See in this theatre of shadows that each of you had cause to hate him. But take heed, for Hercule Poirot will discover the truth, as surely as the curtain must fall at the play's end. A collective shiver passed through the group. Clara gasped softly. Victor Hale's jaw clenched. Lady Evelyn's fingers fluttered at her throat. Poirot stepped closer, lowering his voice to a near whisper, the words falling like a blade. "Amongst you, the assassin stands." Chapter 2. The Widow's Veil. The air within the Montclair Theatre grew heavier with every passing minute. It seemed to settle upon the velvet seats and gilded balconies like an invisible fog, suffocating, pressing down upon those gathered. Outside, London went about its nocturnal business. Cabs rattled across wet cobbles, neon lights flickered in Soho, and the city hummed with restless life. But within these walls, time itself appeared to hold its breath. Lady Evelyn Montclair sat apart from the others, her slender form draped in black silk. The garment was chosen hastily, too hastily, Poirot noted. Its seam spoke not of mourning but of performance, as though she had dressed not to grieve but to be seen grieving. A veil of fine lace obscured her face, though not entirely. Through it gleamed the pale shimmer of tear-streaked skin, and eyes red from either weeping or clever artifice. Poirot approached her with the delicacy of a surgeon handling glass. His patent leather shoes whispered against the boards, his hands clasped neatly behind his back. Inspector Harcourt trailed at a respectful distance, scribbling in his notebook, his impatience barely contained. "Madame," Poirot said softly, "you have suffered a loss most grievous. Permit me to express my condolences." Her gloved hand fluttered to her throat. "Monsieur Poirot, it is all too sudden, too monstrous. Henry was—" she faltered, the word caught like a thorn in her throat. "He was my husband." "Indeed," Poirot replied gently. "And as such you knew him best. You shared his table, his confidences, his ambitions, n'est-ce pas? And yet," his eyes narrowed ever so slightly, "a marriage is not always what it appears to be." Unseemly for me to linger so near the stage. He was strict, always so strict. She broke off, dabbing at her eyes with a scented kerchief. The faint fragrance reached Poirot's nostrils, floral and rare. "Ah," he said softly, "forgive me if I intrude, but your perfume, it is most distinctive. Jardin de Minuit, if I am not mistaken. A Parisian creation, worn only by those with the most discerning taste." Her chin lifted slightly, pride flashing through her grief. "Henry brought it back from Paris for me last spring." "Très bien," murmured Poirot. His mind's eye conjured again the folds of the velvet curtain, heavy and perfumed, as though it had absorbed her very presence. "And when you were in your dressing room, madame, did anyone see you there?" A flicker of hesitation crossed her face, so fleeting one might have missed it. "No, I was alone." Poirot inclined his head. Alone. Always the alibis of solitude are most difficult to prove, but perhaps also most dangerous to invent. "Tell me, madame, when did you last see your husband alive?" Her gaze shifted toward the curtain where Montclair's body still lay, now covered with a white sheet by Harcourt's men. "Shortly before the performance. He was in the wings, giving orders, criticizing the actors as always. He scarcely spoke to me." Her voice cracked, though Poirot caught the undertone not of sorrow, but of long-festered resentment. He lowered himself onto a nearby chair, folding his hands upon his knees. It must have been difficult to be the wife of such a man. Lord Montclair was respected, admired, feared, perhaps even hated. But was he loved, madame? Her veil quivered with her sharp intake of breath. He was my husband. I owed him duty. She faltered, then straightened, her tone hardening. Monsieur Poirot, you cannot mean to suggest— I suggest nothing, Poirot interrupted gently, though his eyes gleamed with quiet intensity. I observe, I ask, I reflect. That is all. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the faint rustle of the curtain.
Mind grew sharper. Here was motive, painted in broad strokes. A marriage without love, ambitions suppressed, a life stifled. Yet he asked no further, not yet. Too much pressure would close her lips entirely. Instead, he stood, bowing with courtly grace. Your honesty does you credit, madame. Grief is a heavy veil, and yet truth may be glimpsed through it. Permit me to say only this. The velvet curtain bears the memory of all who touched it tonight. And already, it whispers of your perfume. Evelyn stiffened. For a heartbeat, her eyes betrayed fear, naked and raw. Then the veil dropped once more, and she turned her face away. Poirot allowed himself the faintest of smiles, invisible to Harcourt, but keen enough to pierce the gloom. The game had begun, and Lady Evelyn Montclair was playing her part with all the skill of an actress upon the grandest stage of all, life and death. Chapter 3. The Disgraced Director. The theatre's wings, normally bustling with stagehands, musicians, and actors, waiting nervously for their cues, were now deserted. Props stood abandoned. A broken mask, a painted goblet, a velvet cloak discarded carelessly across a chair. All seemed like fragments of some forgotten dream. Only Victor Hale remained there, pacing in the half-light like a caged beast, his long fingers running through his dishevelled hair, his eyes wild with restless thought. Poirot entered slowly, his polished shoes squeaking faintly upon the scuffed boards. He glanced about him, noting the faint smell of paint, the dust clinging to costume racks, the solitary gaslight flickering against the back wall. Hale stopped pacing, turning abruptly, his gaze meeting Poirot's with equal parts defiance and despair. "You are here to accuse me," Hale said without preamble, his voice hoarse from hours of suppressed rage. Poirot spread his hands delicately, as though soothing a fretful child. "Accuse? No, monsieur. I am here only to listen. To accuse without hearing, that is folly." Could not bear that anyone else should shine brighter than he. He despised my independence, my passion. Poirot clasped his hands, nodding. La jalousie professionnelle. The jealousy of one man's talent against another's pride. A dangerous fire indeed. Harcourt, who had followed Poirot silently, scribbled in his notebook. "So you admit motive, then? That's plain enough." Hale wheeled on him, eyes blazing. "Motive, yes. But do you think me fool enough to strangle him here, in the theatre, with half London as my witness? No, Inspector. Hatred is one thing, murder is another." Poirot raised a calming hand. "Let us not quarrel, mes amis. Let us examine the facts. Where were you when the curtain fell, Monsieur Hale?" The director's gaze faltered. His hands twitched nervously. "At the tavern, the King's Head, just beyond the alley. I went there to drink, to drown my fury.
Ask the barman, ask the stagehands, they saw me. Poirot's brows arched delicately. Ah, but time is a most slippery thing. At what hour precisely did you arrive? Hale hesitated. I cannot recall the exact time. Sometime after the first act. Yes, that must have been it. I remember hearing the applause from the street. Poirot's mustache twitched. Tiens, a curious memory, to recall applause, but not the hour. Hale flushed scarlet. Are you calling me a liar? No, monsieur, Poirot replied smoothly. I call you imprecise, which for a director is most unusual. Harcourt stepped forward, seizing the opening. You expect us to believe you left the theater in the midst of your dismissal, seething with rage, and yet had no thought of confronting Montclair one last time. It's convenient, isn't it, that your alibi rests on the word of drunken stagehands? Hale's jaw clenched. He turned away, staring into the shadows. You may believe what you wish, but I tell you, I did not kill him. My hands are guilty of many things, but not that. Poirot moved closer, studying him with unblinking eyes. He noted the trembling of the man's fingers, the sweat upon his brow. Rage, yes. Despair, yes. But guilt, perhaps. Or perhaps merely the theater. You mock me, Monsieur Poirot. If I had killed him, I would not have hidden it behind a curtain, like some crude trick. No, I would have killed him in the open, before an audience, so that all the world might see him fall. His voice cracked, and he sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. For a moment, the great Victor Hale seemed no more than a broken man, crushed beneath the weight of his own fury. Poirot regarded him silently. He did not press further. The guilty often overplayed their hand. The innocent often burned too brightly in protest. Which was Hale? That remained to be seen. It was then that Poirot noticed something, a faint bulge in the director's coat pocket. He moved closer, his eyes sharp as a hawk's. Monsieur Hale, he said softly, may I see what you carry there? Hale looked up, startled. His hand went instinctively to his pocket. It is nothing, a scrap, but Poirot was already extending his hand. Reluctantly, Hale withdrew a crumpled piece of paper and placed it in Poirot's palm. Poirot smoothed it gently, his eyes narrowing. It was a theater ticket, dated for tonight's performance, time-stamped. And not for the tavern, but for the precise hour during which Montclair had died. Poirot's eyes glittered. He looked up at Hale, who sat rigid, his face drained of color. Mon ami, Poirot said softly, almost tenderly, you are not so careless a man as to misplace such a thing. And yet, here it is, in your pocket. How very curious. The silence that followed was colder than the grave. Chapter 4. The Actress and the Patron. The dressing rooms of the Montclair Theatre, so often filled with chatter and laughter, were eerily silent that night. Faded bouquets slumped in vases, their petals browned and curling. The mirrors, once blazing with bulbs, reflected only ghostly shapes in the dim light. A faint perfume of powder and roses lingered in the air, mingled with the acrid tang of grease paint. It was here that Clara Whitcomb sat, a pale figure before the mirror. Her golden hair, hastily pinned, was beginning to tumble loose. Benefactor. He discovered me, gave me my first role upon this stage. Without him, I would still be nothing. Do you think me ungrateful, monsieur? No, Poirot replied softly. But gratitude, mademoiselle, can sometimes become entangled with other emotions. Admiration, dependence, perhaps even love? The word hung in the air like a forbidden note. Clara's lips parted, but she did not answer. Instead, tears welled in her eyes. People whispered, she said at last, her voice breaking. They always whisper. They said I was his protégé, his darling.
But it wasn't like that. Not truly. He was stern, cold at times. He held my career in his hands, and he knew it. Poirot leaned forward, his gaze tender yet unyielding. And when he revoked his promise of the leading role, how did that make you feel? Her handkerchief fell to her lap. It crushed me, she whispered. I had worked, sacrificed, given everything to this theater. He swore I would play Desdemona in the new production, and then he told me no. Said Lady Evelyn forbade it, that it would shame her to see me upon the stage, as though I were some creature to be hidden away. Her voice rose, trembling with passion. Harcourt, who stood in the doorway, scribbled quickly in his notebook. Plenty of motive there, he muttered. Clara turned to him in sudden anger. You think I killed him? That I would strangle the very man who lifted me from obscurity? No, Inspector. Whatever my disappointment, I could never. Her voice cracked, and she buried her face in her hands. Poirot laid a hand lightly upon her shoulder. Calm yourself, mademoiselle. It is not by passion alone that we judge guilt. But tell me, where were you at the time of his death? In the dressing room, she answered quickly. Too quickly. I was changing for the curtain call. Alone. No one came. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Alone. Always alone. It is most curious, is it not, how solitude accompanies death? Clara looked up, startled. Poirot smiled faintly, then let his eyes drift toward her handbag, which lay upon the dressing table, its clasp half open. A slip of paper protruded. You in suspicion. Clara's eyes widened with fresh fear. You mean someone planted it? To make it look as though I... She broke off, her hands trembling. Poirot folded the letter and tucked it neatly into his pocket. It is a possibility, but let us not leap too quickly. Tell me, mademoiselle, did you show this letter to anyone? No, she cried. I kept it hidden. I was afraid. If Lady Evelyn saw it, she would destroy me. Poirot leaned back, considering her. The shadows from the mirror bulbs fell across her face, highlighting her youth, her desperation. She was a woman on the cusp of fame, dangling precariously between triumph and ruin, a convenient pawn, perhaps, in a larger game. Harcourt broke the silence. Or she could have used that letter as an excuse. Spurned, humiliated, she takes revenge in the cruelest way. Clara whirled on him, her eyes flashing. No, I swear it. I loved the stage too much. I would never stain it with blood. Poirot raised a hand, silencing them both. His voice was calm, but beneath it lay steel. Mademoiselle Whitcomb, the truth will come, as surely as the curtain must fall. For now, I ask only that you remain. Do not leave this theater until I give permission. Comprenez? She nodded weakly, sinking back into her chair. Poirot stood, bowing once more with old-world grace. As he and Harcourt stepped into the corridor, Poirot drew the letter from his pocket again, smoothing the torn edges. His eyes glittered in the dim light. Inspector, he murmured, observe this handwriting. It resembles Montclair's, yes, but too closely. It is an imitation, a copy. Someone wished to cast suspicion upon the little actress, but Hercule Poirot, he does not fall so easily into traps. Harcourt frowned. Then who planted it? Poirot's mustache twitched. Patience, mon ami. The stage is set, the players in position. But remember, this is no comedy. The letter is a red curtain meant to hide the truth. And behind that curtain, his eyes narrowed, waits the true assassin. Chapter 5. The Physician's Secret. The corridor leading to Dr. Keller's private rooms within the theater smelled faintly of antiseptic and camphor, a jarring contrast to the musk of perfume and grease paint that clung to the stage. The theater had given the physician a chamber near the dressing rooms, a convenience for both the cast and Montclair himself, who often required attention for his fragile heart. Poirot paused at the threshold, gazing with quiet curiosity. Strange, is it not, Inspector, how a theater, temple of illusion, should contain also a physician's office, temple of truth? Harcourt snorted. If you call truth little glass bottles and leeches, the man's a quack, if you ask me. Non, mon ami, let us not underestimate the science. Sometimes even quacks conceal great cleverness. He knocked once. A voice within, deep and measured, answered, "Enter." Dr. Samuel Keller was a tall, cadaverous man with iron-gray hair and a neatly trimmed beard. His eyes were sharp, clinical, betraying nothing of warmth. He sat at a narrow desk piled with medical ledgers, prescriptions, and the gleam of surgical instruments that glinted in the lamplight. On a shelf behind him rested rows of medicine bottles, their labels neatly written in Keller's precise hand. Poirot bowed. "Dr. Keller, forgive the intrusion. Hercule Poirot, at your service." "I know who you are," Keller replied, his voice flat, "and I know why you have come." "Ah, then you have anticipated my little questions?" Keller's lips tightened. "If you must, but be brief. I am still in shock, monsieur. My patient is dead." Poirot settled gracefully into a chair. "Dead. By strangulation, not by natural failure of the heart. And yet, doctor, you tended Lord Montclair's health most closely, no? You alone would know the fragility of his condition." Keller inclined his head. Indeed, Lord Montclair had long suffered from cardiac weakness. His arteries were narrow, his nerves strained by years of excess. I prescribed rest, a regulated diet, and digitalis
For my residence here. He valued having a physician at hand. But do not mistake necessity for devotion. He was capricious, often cruel, yet murder? No, that is not my method. Poirot tapped his fingertips together. Perhaps not. Yet, doctor, it interests me greatly that you were so swift to arrive upon the scene, almost as if you had expected disaster. Keller's eyes narrowed. I heard the commotion. Like the others, I ran at once. Mais non, Poirot murmured, producing a small notebook. Several witnesses recall seeing you leave Montclair's dressing room not 5 minutes before the crime was discovered. For the first time, the physician hesitated. His long fingers closed around a paperweight on the desk. I was summoned, he said at last. Lord Montclair had complained of dizziness. I examined him. He was agitated, restless, but his pulse was steady. I advised him to rest. Then I left. That is all. Poirot leaned forward, eyes intent. And yet, you did not mention this earlier, when first questioned. Why the omission, doctor? A pause, heavy with tension. Keller's jaw clenched. Because it would have seemed compromising. That I was alone with him so near the time of death. I wished to avoid suspicion. Justement, Poirot exclaimed, rising suddenly. You see the difficulty. By concealing, you create suspicion, where perhaps none existed. He turned to the medicine shelf, his sharp gaze scanning the bottles. One in particular caught his attention, a vial of digitalis. The label nearly rubbed away. Poirot lifted it delicately. You administered this, oui? Keller nodded. At times, when his heart faltered. Poirot tilted the bottle, examining the dregs within. Curious. This is nearly empty, though you prescribed it but last week. Has Montclair been generous in his doses? Keller frowned. No more than I allowed. At least to my knowledge. Aha! Poirot's mustache twitched. Then perhaps the hand that murdered him
also sought to weaken him first. An overdose, untraceable, save to one who understands the heart. Harcourt leaned forward. So you're saying
Performance.
He said he feared poison, a hand in the dark, but he would not name his enemy. He only laughed, bitterly, and muttered, "They all want me gone."
Poirot's eyes sharpened. Tiens, at last, a confession of value. And yet you chose not to warn anyone, not to prevent this crime? Keller's hands trembled. If I had spoken, who would have believed me? Montclair was ever melodramatic. I dismissed it as fancy. And now? His voice faltered. Poirot regarded him with grave intensity. Then, Dr. Keller, you held knowledge of danger, and yet you remained silent. That, perhaps, is the greater crime. The physician turned back to face him, his eyes hollow. Do with me what you must, Poirot. But know this, I did not strangle him. I could not. My guilt lies in negligence, not in blood. Poirot inclined his head slightly, then addressed Harcourt. We shall see. For the moment, let us keep watch upon the medicines. There may lie the key. As they left the room, Poirot glanced once more at the vial of digitalis, its pale crystals catching the light. His mind was alight with patterns, calculations, possibilities. To Harcourt he murmured, Do you not see, mon ami? Montclair feared poison. He spoke of an unnamed enemy. And this bottle, it tells us that fear was not without cause. The strangling, it may have been but the final act, the curtain, upon a longer plot. Harcourt frowned. You mean someone tried to kill him twice? Poirot's moustache curved upward, enigmatic. Perhaps, Inspector. Or perhaps the poisoner and the strangler are not the same hand. Ah, quelle intrigue! The play grows darker, the stage more crowded. But remember, always, there is method in the chaos. And Hercule Poirot, he shall untangle it. The inspector muttered, You always say that, and yet every new clue seems to make it worse. Poirot smiled faintly, his eyes already distant. But that, mon cher Harcourt, is the nature of mysteries.
Gilt-framed mirrors, the powdered suspects with their perfumed secrets. It was as if murder had chosen to dress itself in finery tonight. He tugged at his moustache. Poirot's moustache was always immaculate, absurdly so. Harcourt's own was plain, bristled and stubborn, like himself. And it struck him yet again that he and Poirot were men of opposite worlds. Poirot with his dainty steps and endless talk of psychology. Harcourt who believed in mud on boots, ink on reports, the weight of handcuffs on a wrist. And yet, Poirot had a way of unsettling him. Inspector. A constable approached, saluting. We've cleared the stage. No one left except staff and suspects. All await your orders, sir. Good. Keep them where they are. No one leaves until I say so. The constable departed. Harcourt remained where he was, listening to the hollow theatre. In the silence, his thoughts turned restless. Clara Whitcomb, weeping and pale. Keller, evasive and clinical. Evelyn Montclair, cold as ice. And Poirot, striding through it all with his little questions and sly glances. Harcourt's fists clenched. Was the Belgian leading him towards truth, or merely toying with him as the Frenchman liked to do? The inspector returned to Montclair's private office, a place as rich and oppressive as its master had been. Dark wood panelling absorbed the lamplight. Leather-bound volumes pressed against one another on high shelves. A decanter of port still glowed ruby on the desk, a glass half drained beside it. He sat heavily in Montclair's chair.
The leather groaned and he leaned back, staring at the ceiling. How many times had Montclair himself sat here, writing checks, plotting plays, breaking promises? Harcourt began rifling through the desk drawers. If Poirot was right, if there were hidden currents beneath the surface, then the answers might lie not in words but in paper, ink, and signatures. Bills, receipts, playbills, letters of complaint, and, a packet of correspondence tied with a black ribbon. Harcourt untied it, frowning. They were letters from creditors, their language urgent, demanding. Despite his reputation as a
Turned sharply.
Poirot stood in the doorway, eyes twinkling. "Mon cher inspecteur," he said lightly, "you search with vigor. A little rough, perhaps, but vigorous." Harcourt scowled. "You knew about this, didn't you? The insurance." Poirot stepped closer, folding his hands behind his back. "Mais oui, I had my suspicions. Lady Evelyn, she is practical, no? Such women do not suffer the company of fools without compensation. But you see, Inspector, it is not enough to have motive. One must also have opportunity and the courage to act." "And you think she hasn't?" Harcourt snapped. "You didn't see her eyes, cold as frost. She could have wrapped that scarf round his throat and watched him choke without flinching." Poirot raised a delicate eyebrow. "Perhaps. But she would not soil her hands. Not Madame. If she wished her husband gone, she would hire, persuade, or manipulate. But she would not strangle. No. That is too crude for Lady Evelyn." Harcourt slammed the drawer shut. "Always psychology with you. But a rope round the neck is simple, clean, final. Don't dress it in poetry." Poirot's smile faded. "You are right, mon ami. Murder is never poetry. But it is theatre. And every actor plays to type." Harcourt shook his head. "You talk riddles while I deal with bodies. Let me be plain. Clara lied about being alone. Keller lied about seeing Montclair. Evelyn lied about loving her husband. And you," he jabbed a finger at Poirot, "you're holding things back from me." Poirot inclined his head gravely. "Yes, Inspector, it is true." Harcourt blinked. "You admit it?" "Mais bien sûr," Poirot's eyes gleamed, "because to reveal everything too soon is to destroy the pattern. And Hercule Poirot, he loves patterns. The design must be complete before the truth can be told." The inspector swore under his breath. "You'll drive me mad." Poirot laid a hand upon his arm. "Courage, mon ami. Soon the fog shall lift." But Harcourt was not soothed. As Poirot drifted away down the corridor, Hummel rubbed it between finger and thumb. And, in that instant, he knew. "By God," he whispered, "this isn't cloth at all. It's evidence." He straightened, lantern swinging, heart pounding. At last, he had something Poirot had not yet seen. Something real, tangible, unarguable. The inspector's eyes hardened. "We'll see, Monsieur Poirot. Let's see how your patterns stand against hard proof." And, with the scarf clutched tight in his hand, Harcourt strode from the archive, the shadows of the theater closing behind him like curtains at the end of an act. Chapter 7. The Widow's Mask. Lady Evelyn Montclair received them in the grand retiring room, a chamber heavy with damask drapes and gilt-framed mirrors. The flicker of lamplight played upon her diamonds, though she had already changed from her evening gown into a somber black dress of crepe. The transformation had been swift, theatrical, morning attire donned as though she had rehearsed the part. She stood by the fireplace, tall and statuesque,
Her dark hair swept into a severe chignon. Her posture was impeccable, her gaze steady, her grief, if grief it was, neatly folded beneath layers of composure. Inspector Harcourt muttered under his breath, "Cold as the grave." Poirot, however, inclined his head with courtesy. "Madame, allow me to extend my most respectful condolences. Hercule Poirot, at your service in this most tragic hour." Her eyes flickered, appraising him with faint disdain. "I have heard of you, Monsieur Poirot, a Belgian detective, is it not? My husband, for all his faults, admired the exotic. I confess I do not." Poirot bowed again, unruffled. "Madame, the truth is not a matter of nationality, it is universal. And it is the truth we must seek, n'est-ce pas?" She gave a faint, brittle smile. The truth, a word my late husband seldom employed. Harcourt stepped forward, his notebook ready. "Lady Evelyn, we'll need to know your whereabouts at the time of the murder." "I was in the box, Inspector," she replied coolly. "With friends. Many saw me. I remained there until the curtain fell."
If you means motive and gain, that's a strong suggestion. But Poirot raised a hand. "Patience, Inspector. Lady Evelyn is not a woman who soils her gloves. She is a strategist, not an executioner. If she wished her husband dead, she would arrange it with subtlety, not brute force." Lady Evelyn inclined her head, acknowledging the accuracy. "You see, Inspector, your foreign colleague understands me better than you, or flatters you," Harcourt muttered. Poirot ignored him, instead gesturing toward the lavish room. "Tell me, madame, this theatre, your husband's jewel, his obsession, yet it bleeds money, does it not? And now, with him gone, it falls into your hands. What do you intend?" Her lips curved. "Close it, of course. Sell the building, clear the debts. The theatre is a vulgar enterprise. I endured it for his sake, but I have no wish to endure further." The words fell like stones. Harcourt scowled. "That means every actor, every worker, every hanger-on here has reason to hate you too." She met his gaze without flinching. "Let them hate. Their opinions are nothing to me." Poirot studied her carefully. Her voice was cold, but her hands, slender, adorned with diamonds, betrayed the faintest tremor. He noticed how one finger tapped lightly against the mantelpiece, in rhythm with her words. A signal of nerves, perhaps, or calculation. "Might I ask, madame," Poirot said gently, "about the letter Miss Whitcomb received? The one promising her a future free of Evelyn. Do you know anything of it?" Her eyes narrowed. "Clara Whitcomb? That grasping little sparrow? My husband indulged her far beyond her talent. I knew of no letter, but if he wrote such words, then he was more a fool than even I supposed." Poirot's moustache twitched. But what if it was not his hand? What if another sought to draw suspicion upon her? Lady Evelyn gave a low, humorless laugh. "Then let them. Clara is a child playing at stardom. If scandal destroys her, so much the better." Harcourt scribbled furiously, glancing at Poirot with exasperation. To him, Evelyn's every word screamed motive, opportunity cloaked in disdain. But Poirot's mask had slipped, and he knew also when to retreat, to preserve the game. "Merci, madame. You have given us much to consider." She turned away, dismissing them with a wave of her hand. "Then leave me to my grief, Inspector, whatever shape it takes." As they departed, Harcourt hissed, "She as good as confessed! The insurance, the hatred, the contempt, what more do you need?" Poirot's reply was quiet, almost sorrowful. "I need the truth, mon ami, not the performance of truth. And Lady Evelyn Montclair, she is an actress more skilled than Clara Whitcomb, more subtle than all this theatre. She plays a part, yes, but whether it is the role of widow or of conspirator,
that we must yet decide. They reached the dim corridor once more. Behind them, in the flickering lamplight, Lady Evelyn Montclair stood motionless at her mantelpiece, and in the hush of the room she whispered words neither man heard. It had to happen. It was always going to happen. Chapter 8. The Rivals Stage. The green room smelled of tobacco smoke and stale cologne, a heady perfume of vanity and ambition. Mirrors framed in bulbs lined the walls, each surrounded by the flotsam of actors' lives, powder, grease paint, bouquets gone limp. And at the centre, like a monarch surveying a court of shadows, lounged Edward Crispin. He was tall, with hair slicked and gleaming, moustaches waxed into sharp points, and a crimson silk robe draped over his shoulders. His features were handsomely cut, though softened now by indulgence and fatigue. A half-drained glass of brandy rested on the table beside him, and he waved it at Poirot and Inspector Harcourt as though bestowing an honour. "Ah, the hounds of justice," he drawled. "Come to sniff about my dressing-room. Well, gentlemen, be gentle. My nerves are fragile after such a spectacle." Harcourt bristled. "You'll find this no laughing matter, Crispin. A man's been murdered, and from what I hear, you've more cause than most to celebrate." Crispin gave a theatrical gasp. "Celebrate? The death of Montclair? Inspector, I would sooner celebrate the death of Shakespeare himself. True, Montclair
Gowns that itch. But yes, Montclair and I exchanged words, harsh words. He mocked my performance. I mocked his wife. Tempers flared. But if harsh words were daggers, the whole of Drury Lane would be a morgue by dawn. Poirot moved closer, lowering his voice. "Tell me, monsieur, what precisely did you say?" For once, the bravado faltered. Crispin looked into his glass, swirling the amber liquid. I told him his reign was ending, that no velvet curtain could conceal the rot beneath, that audiences grow weary of tyrants. "And how did he reply?" Poirot pressed. Crispin's eyes darkened. He laughed, that dreadful booming laugh. He said I would die forgotten while he carved his name in marble. He said even my failures would serve as footnotes to his triumphs. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken fury. Harcourt scribbled furiously, nodding. "Sounds like a threat to me." Poirot studied Crispin carefully. "And yet, monsieur, you live still. It was Montclair who died." Crispin slammed his glass upon the table, brandy spilling across the wood. "Yes, because the gods are unjust. They stole him at the height of his power and left me to languish in mediocrity. Do you think I cannot feel the irony? Do you think I do not despise it?" The mask had slipped. Beneath the polished arrogance lay a wounded creature, raw with envy, gnawed by insecurity. Poirot saw it, though Harcourt seemed only to see guilt. "Where were you," the inspector demanded, "when Montclair was killed?" Crispin hesitated. His eyes darted toward the mirror as though seeking an answer from his own reflection. "In my dressing room, preparing for my scene, alone." "Convenient," Harcourt muttered. "No alibi." Poirot, however, leaned closer. "Monsieur, forgive my frankness. You are an actor, yes? A master of disguise, of slipping unseen through corridors, of adopting roles. If you wished to leave this room unseen, you could." Crispin's lips curved in a sly smile. "Perhaps. But why should I? Do you imagine me backstage when Montclair died?" Harcourt's pen froze. "You what?" But Crispin raised a trembling finger. "I did not kill him. I swear it, upon all that remains of my career. I went backstage to watch, to see if he faltered, to revel in a stumble. But when I came near the wings, there was movement, a shadow, And then his fall. I fled. If the world learns I was there, they will condemn me, guilty or no. Poirot's gaze sharpened. A shadow, you say? Man or woman? Crispin shook his head. I could not tell. Only smaller than Montclair, quicker, like a wraith. And then the scream. That scream still echoes in my ears. Harcourt's face was thunderous. You withheld this, Crispin? You admit you were at the scene and kept silent? That alone could hang you. But Poirot lifted a hand. Calm, Inspector. We must not confuse cowardice with guilt. Monsieur Crispin speaks truth of a kind. It is not the whole truth, but it is a fragment, and fragments, arranged correctly, reveal the whole mosaic. Crispin slumped back into his chair, sweat shining at his temples. The bravado was gone now, leaving only a man hollowed by fear. Believe what you will, but know this. If Montclair was slain, then so too shall others fall. He had enemies in every corner. I merely lacked the courage to be the first. Poirot's mustache twitched as he regarded the trembling actor. Perhaps, monsieur. Or perhaps you played a role greater than you yet admit. The room hung heavy with his words. Outside, the theater groaned as the last of the audience dispersed, the echo of their chatter fading into silence. And in that silence, Poirot knew the stage was still set, the drama not yet complete, for Edward Crispin had spoken of a shadow, and shadows, Poirot thought grimly, often conceal the deadliest truths. The Patron's Ledger. The lounge of the Montclair Theatre had been hastily transformed into a salon for the comfort of its more distinguished patrons. Velvet chairs huddled about a marble-topped table. Chair, flipping open his notebook. You're saying you bankrolled him? I invested, Penrose corrected, his voice firm. There is a difference. A patron supports art. An investor expects a return. Montclair promised me both. Poirot's mustache twitched. And did he deliver, monsieur? Penrose's smile was tight. Rarely. The theater bled money. Scenery imported from Paris, costumes sewn with real jewels, orchestras paid double the going rate. All to gratify Montclair's vision. I cautioned him, but he laughed, as he always laughed, and assured me the next production would be the triumph that repaid all. Alas, triumph was always one curtain away. Harcourt leaned forward. Sounds like he was robbing you blind. You must have been furious. Furious? Penrose's eyes glinted. Perhaps. But I am not a fool, Inspector. A man does not give without securing collateral. Montclair owed me far more than he admitted, and debts, unlike men, do not vanish with death. Poirot noted the hardness beneath the polished words. You speak as a banker, monsieur. Yet I suspect there was more between you and Montclair than mere business. A tension, how shall I say, personal. For the first time, Penrose's composure faltered. His fingers drummed against the glass before him, betraying unease. You are perceptive, Poirot. Yes, Montclair and I quarreled. Not merely over money, over attachments. Ah, Poirot murmured, glancing meaningfully toward the stage. Miss Clara Whitcomb? Penrose's face darkened. She is young, impressionable, a singer of promise. I offered her guidance, introductions, stability. Montclair mocked me for it, said I sought to purchase her affections as I purchased everything else. Perhaps he was right. But Clara is not for sale. Harcourt frowned. So Montclair stood between you and the girl. Another reason you might have wanted him gone. Penrose's hand tightened upon his glass. Do not mistake sentiment for savagery, Inspector. I am not so clumsy as to strangle a man with my own hands. If I wished Montclair destroyed,
I could ruin him with to say he held knowledge best kept buried. A man like Montclair gathered secrets the way others gather autographs. He kept them as weapons, ready to be unsheathed. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And if he had drawn his blade against you, monsieur, you might have struck first. Penrose met his gaze squarely. Perhaps, but I assure you, not with rope about his throat. I fight with contracts, not cord. Besides, he leaned forward, his voice dropping, his death benefits me far less than you imagine. The theater remains mine to salvage or abandon, but the debts, the scandal, they remain as well. Death, Poirot, is rarely tidy in finance. Poirot allowed the silence to stretch, then asked gently, "Where were you, monsieur, when Montclair met his end?" "In the lounge, here," Penrose replied smoothly. "With other patrons. They will vouch for me. I raised a glass to his success even as he strutted across the stage. Irony, eh? I toasted a dead man." Harcourt jotted notes, muttering, "So you say. We'll check it." Poirot, however, remained thoughtful. He glanced around the room, the cigars, the ledgers stacked discreetly upon a side table, the polished veneer of wealth. Beneath it all, he sensed a hunger, a ruthlessness, a willingness to bend lives like numbers in a ledger. He rose, bowing slightly. "Merci, monsieur. You have been most illuminating." Penrose's eyes narrowed. "Be cautious, Poirot. Men who pry too deep into ledgers sometimes find deaths of their own." Poirot's mustache bristled, but he merely inclined his head once more and turned to leave. As the door closed behind them, Harcourt muttered, "Slippery devil, hiding something clear as day." "Oui," Poirot murmured. "He hides much. Money, love, pride, all entwined. And something darker still. Montclair held a secret over him, a secret worth killing for, perhaps. The question is, did Penrose kill to silence it? Or does the true killer yet hold that secret in—
"You?" Harcourt asked gruffly from the wings, lighting another cigarette. "Wouldn't blame you. Place gives me the creeps." Poirot adjusted his cuffs. "Mon cher, I do not believe in phantoms, but I do believe in atmospheres. And here," he gestured to the shadows above, "the air is thick with secrets." He walked slowly across the boards, his patent leather shoes clicking softly. With each step he reviewed the suspects, the pattern forming in his mind like a tapestry of silken threads. Clara Whitcomb, the ingenue. Ambition blazing in her eyes, her career tethered to Montclair's whims. She had the passion, the desperation, and the letter, always the letter. But her fear seemed real, not feigned. Was she a child used as a pawn, or a guilty hand trembling in remorse? Richard Vale, the stage manager. Practical, meticulous, resentful of Montclair's chaos. He had knowledge of ropes, of rigging, of backstage passages. He moved like a man accustomed to shadows. Yet his anger was rooted in loyalty to the theater itself. Would such a man destroy the very institution he cherished? Lady Evelyn Montclair, the widow, icy, composed, veiled in contempt. She gained money, freedom, dignity in her husband's death. Yet her hands were unsullied, her grief a mask fitted too swiftly, too perfect, too prepared. Was she the orchestrator, or merely another player in Montclair's cruel game? Edward Crispin, the rival actor. Vanity and envy were etched into every gesture, every glance. His confession of being backstage placed him perilously close to guilt, yet his cowardice rang true. He was a man of words, not deeds. Unless desperation had driven him to violence, he could scarcely admit even to himself. Alfred Penrose, the patron,
a man of wealth, appetite, and secrets. Montclair had blackmailed him, of that Poirot was now certain. But over what? Money, perhaps, or Clara, the jewel of his affections. His motives were many, his resources great. But would such a man risk everything on a strangler's knot? Poirot halted center stage. The great velvet curtain loomed above him, folds descending like a tide of shadows. He tilted his head, listening, and there it came, a faint whisper.
Arrange such things, by whisper, by command. Murder does not require the murderer's hands, only the murderer's design. He traced a finger along the coarse rope, then lifted it to his nose, sniffing. His eyes narrowed, and here, a trace of perfume, faint but unmistakable, not the scent of a man. Harcourt cursed softly. So, a woman? Poirot did not answer. He was studying the pulley mechanism, noting scratches upon the wood, fresh fraying upon the rope's edge. The stage had spoken, and Poirot had listened. They moved then to Montclair's dressing room, where the air still lingered with cigar smoke and brandy. Poirot opened drawers, examined ledgers, peered at scraps of correspondence. Harcourt grumbled at the meticulousness, but Poirot ignored him. His fingers were as precise as a surgeon's, his mind cataloguing every fragment. At last, he found it, a slip of paper tucked behind a mirror. A note, written in Montclair's bold scrawl. Penrose bleeds. Evelyn breaks. Crispin begs. Clara dreams. Vale schemes. All in my palm. Poirot's brows arched. Voila! He saw himself as a puppeteer, each string in his grasp. But the puppets, Inspector, they do not always dance to the master's tune. Sometimes they cut the strings. They left the room, the note secure in Poirot's pocket. The theater seemed colder now, the silence deeper. As they passed beneath the gallery, a door creaked open, and a draught carried the faintest sound, a woman's sob, quickly stifled. Harcourt made to rush forward, but Poirot stayed him with a hand. No, let them weep. Guilt and grief often wear the same mask. They stood again in the auditorium, gazing up at the velvet curtain. Poirot's mind worked furiously, fitting pieces together, discarding false patterns. His lips moved as he whispered to himself. Montclair mocked. Montclair threatened. Montclair controlled. And now Montclair is silent. Who among them feared his tongue most? Who